In the heart of our planet's lungs, where the canopy weaves shadows older than memory and the air thrums with life unseen, there exists a green cathedral that has guarded its secrets for millennia. The Amazon rainforest, spanning across 9 countries and covering over 2 million square miles, remains one of Earth's last frontiers, not because we lack the tools to explore it, but because it seems to actively resist our intrusion. Beneath its emerald veil, indigenous peoples speak in hushed tones of the encantados, the enchanted ones who walk between worlds. Explorers vanish along tributaries that appear on no official maps. Satellite images reveal geometric patterns carved into the forest floor, too precise to be natural, too ancient to be explained. Tonight, we venture into the green heart of mystery itself, following whispers that suggest the Amazon may harbour more than jaguars and trees. It may conceal an entire civilization that chose the shadows over the sun. If you find yourself drawn to these hidden currents that flow beneath our accepted reality, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And in the comments below, tell me, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it in your corner of the world? I love seeing our community of seekers span across continents and time zones, each of you listening as darkness or dawn touches your sky. Deep within the Amazon's sprawling embrace lies a paradox that has puzzled scientists for decades. This is not merely a forest. It is a living library, its memory encoded in root systems that stretch for thousands of miles, in soil compositions that defy conventional understanding, and in the very DNA of species that should not exist together yet flourish in impossible harmony. The numbers alone tell a staggering story. The Amazon contains approximately 16,000 tree species, yet recent studies suggest we have identified less than half of what truly grows there. In a single hectare, roughly the size of 2 football fields, researchers have documented over 300 species of trees, more biodiversity than exists in all of North America. But it is not the quantity that disturbs the sleep of botanists worldwide. It is the organization. Travel deep enough into certain regions of the Amazon, beyond the reach of logging roads and tourist boats, and you will find yourself in what indigenous peoples call the arranged forest. Here, medicinal plants grow in clusters so precisely organized that they resemble the careful layout of a pharmacy. Trees that naturally repel insects stand sentinel around groves of more vulnerable species, forming protective barriers that seem almost deliberately planned. Fruit trees appear in geometric patterns, their canopies interlocking to create vast aerial highways that connect feeding grounds across impossible distances. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a botanist from the University of São Paulo who has spent 30 years studying Amazonian biodiversity, describes her first encounter with one of these arranged forests. I was following a tributary of the Solimões River, documenting plant species in what was supposed to be virgin forest. But what I found defied everything I knew about natural plant distribution. The medicinal plants were grouped by therapeutic function anti-inflammatories here, digestives there, respiratory treatments in another grove. It was as if someone had planted the world's most sophisticated natural pharmacy, then waited centuries for it to mature. The indigenous peoples who serve as guides in these regions speak of the arrangements not as human cultivation, but as the work of the plant teachers, beings who, according to oral tradition, emerged from the deep forest long ago to show early humans which plants could heal and which could harm. These teachers, described in remarkably consistent detail across dozens of unrelated tribes, were said to be taller than ordinary humans, with an intimate knowledge of the forest that went far beyond survival. They understood it as a living system, capable of being guided and shaped but never truly controlled. Carlos Yawanawa, an elder of the Yawanawa people, explains, "My grandfather's grandfather learned from the plant teachers. They did not speak with voices like ours, but with the language of growth itself. Where they walked, the forest remembered. Where they planted, the earth listened. They showed us that every tree, every vine, every flower has its place in the great conversation. But they also warned us that some parts of the forest speak only to those who belong there. This concept of belonging becomes crucial when examining the deeper mystery of Amazonian plant distribution. ethnobotanists have long wondered how indigenous peoples across the vast Amazon basin developed such sophisticated knowledge of plant medicines despite being separated by hundreds of miles of dense forest and having no apparent contact with each other. The traditional answer involves trade routes and the slow transmission of knowledge through generations. But recent discovery suggests something far more intriguing. In 2018, a joint expedition of Brazilian and international researchers using ground-penetrating radar detected what appeared to be a vast network of underground chambers connected by natural and possibly modified tunnels beneath a section of the Amazon basin in Acre State. The chambers, some as large as aircraft hangars, showed signs of air circulation and water flow that could not be explained by natural cave formation alone. More puzzling still, the tunnel network seemed to connect areas where specific medicinal plants grew in their most potent concentrations. The team's findings were published in a limited scientific journal, but the full data was classified by the Brazilian government under environmental protection statutes. Dr. James Crawford, a geologist from the expedition who spoke anonymously, revealed that the underground network extended much farther than their initial surveys could map. We followed one tunnel for 3 kilometers before our equipment began malfunctioning. The air down there was remarkably pure, and the temperature remained constant despite surface variations. Most unusual were the walls. They appeared natural, but showed signs of modification, as if someone had carefully enlarged and shaped existing cave systems over a very long period of time. The indigenous response to these discoveries has been consistent across tribal lines. These underground spaces are known, but they are not meant for outsiders. The Ashua people of Ecuador speak of the roads beneath the roots, passages that connect sacred sites across vast distances, allowing shamans to travel between distant communities for ceremonies and consultations. But these roads, they insist, are not merely physical tunnels. They are pathways that exist fully only for those who have been prepared through years of plant medicine work and spiritual discipline. Even more intriguing are the soil samples taken from areas above these suspected underground networks. The terra preta, or Amazonian dark earth, found in these regions shows a complexity of composition that has puzzled soil scientists for decades. This rich black soil contains not only the expected organic matter and charcoal, but also ceramic fragments, unusual mineral deposits, and microbial communities that seem engineered rather than naturally occurring. Dr. William Woods, a soil scientist at the University of Kansas who has studied terra preta for over 20 years, describes it as the most sophisticated soil management system ever discovered. The dark earth retains nutrients far longer than typical rainforest soil, supports plant growth at rates that exceed modern agricultural yields, and seems to actually improve over time rather than degrading. Most mysteriously, it continues to expand outward from its original locations at a rate of approximately 1 centimeter per year, as if it were alive and growing. The distribution of terra preta sites across the Amazon basin reveals another puzzle. Rather than appearing randomly, these soil anomalies form patterns that, when mapped, resemble the layouts of major urban centers. Archaeologists have identified what appear to be residential areas, ceremonial centers, agricultural zones, and even possible industrial districts, all connected by straight lines of enriched soil that could represent ancient roadways or utility corridors. But if these patterns represent the remains of a sophisticated civilization, where are the ruins? Where are the stone monuments, the metal tools, the pottery shards that typically mark human habitation? The answer may lie in a fundamental misunderstanding of what constitutes architecture in an environment where stone is scarce and wood is abundant beyond measure. Professor Anna Roosevelt, an archaeologist at the University of Illinois who has challenged conventional timelines of Amazonian settlement, proposes that we are looking for the wrong kind of evidence. European archaeology trained us to seek monuments of stone and metal, but in the Amazon, the most sophisticated architecture would be living architecture structures grown rather than built, cities that blend so perfectly with the forest that they become indistinguishable from nature itself unless you know exactly what to look for. This concept of living architecture gained support from indigenous accounts of the tree cities. settlements said to exist in the high canopy, constructed not from cut timber, but from living trees guided to grow into specific shapes and formations. The Kayapo people describe vast platforms woven between the crowns of giant cecropia trees, connected by bridges that are not built but trained from flexible vines. These aerial settlements, they claim, can house thousands of inhabitants while remaining completely invisible from the ground. The engineering challenges of such construction would be immense by conventional standards, but indigenous knowledge of plant behavior suggests techniques that mainstream science is only beginning to understand. The practice of tree shaping, found in various forms among forest peoples worldwide, involves guiding the growth of young trees through careful bending, grafting, and pruning to create desired forms. In the Amazon, this technique is said to have been perfected to create not just individual shaped trees, but entire interconnected structures that grow stronger and more complex over decades. However, the most unsettling aspect of the forest memory lies not in what grows there, but in what does not. Certain areas of the Amazon, despite optimal growing conditions, remain strangely barren of specific plant species. These absent zones appear to be maintained by some form of biological control that prevents unwanted growth while encouraging desired species. Dr. Sarah Chen, an ecological systems analyst from Stanford University, has spent the last 5 years mapping these absent zones. What we're seeing is ecological precision that exceeds anything we can achieve with modern agricultural techniques. Certain areas are kept clear of competing vegetation not through cutting or burning, but through biological mechanisms we don't fully understand. The soil remains fertile, the climate optimal, yet specific species simply will not grow there, as if they've received a message that this space is reserved for something else. The something else, according to indigenous testimony, are the gardens of the forest keepers, the hidden inhabitants who tend the Amazon like a vast living city. These gardens are said to produce foods unknown to surface dwellers, medicines of extraordinary potency, and materials that blur the line between organic and manufactured. The plants grown there reportedly have properties that seem to defy botanical classifications: vines that conduct light like fiber-optic cables, trees whose sap hardens into a substance stronger than steel, yet flexible as rubber, flowers that produce their own electricity. While such descriptions invite skepticism, recent discoveries in biomimicry research suggest that many impossible properties of plants are simply beyond current scientific understanding. The study of how trees communicate through underground fungal networks has revealed that forests operate as integrated information systems, sharing resources and warnings across vast distances through chemical and electrical signals that we are only beginning to decode. The mycorrhizal networks that connect tree roots throughout the Amazon basin form what researchers now call the Wood Wide Web, a communication system of staggering complexity. Dr. Suzanne Simard, whose groundbreaking research revealed the extent of forest communication networks, describes the Amazon's underground internet as the most sophisticated biological network on Earth, possibly more complex than the human brain in terms of the number of connections and the speed of information transfer. But if the forest itself is conscious, as many indigenous shamans insist, then what kind of intelligence guides its growth? And if that intelligence is not merely natural, but influenced by conscious beings who have learned to work in partnership with it, what would their civilization look like to surface dwellers accustomed to cities of glass and steel? The answers may be hidden not just in the depths of the rainforest, but in the depths of human perception itself. For according to those who claim to have glimpsed the true Amazon, the forest shows different faces to different visitors, revealing its secrets only to those who approach with the proper understanding of their place in the web of life. As indigenous elder Don Carlos Perez of the Shipibo people explains, the forest is not a place you go to find things. The forest is a place that finds you when you are ready to be found, and what it shows you depends not on what you want to see, but on what you are prepared to understand. The statistics, when compiled from official sources across 9 countries, paint a troubling picture that few governments wish to acknowledge publicly. Each year, an average of 347 people enter the Amazon basin and are never seen again. These are not the casual tourists who venture a few miles from established eco-lodges, nor the unlucky few who suffer accidents on well-travelled waterways. These are experienced explorers, trained scientists, indigenous guides who have navigated the forest for decades, people who should not disappear without explanation. Yet they do. The pattern becomes more disturbing when mapped geographically. The disappearances cluster around specific regions of the Amazon, forming rough boundaries that indigenous peoples have marked as forbidden territories for centuries. These zones shift over time, but certain areas remain consistently dangerous to outsiders, not because of natural hazards, but for reasons that defy conventional explanation. Colonel Percy Fawcett's expedition remains the most famous of these vanishings, but it was far from the first or the last. In 1925, Fawcett, his son Jack, and their companion Raleigh Ramel disappeared while searching for the lost city of Z in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil. Despite dozens of search expeditions over the following decades, no trace of the party was ever found. The Brazilian government officially closed the case in 1979, but unofficial searches continue to this day. What makes Fawcett's disappearance particularly intriguing is not the fact that it occurred, but the circumstances preceding it. His final communications describe encounters with indigenous peoples who seemed to know of his coming, guides who led his party along routes not found on any map, and geographical features that appeared to shift location between observations. Fawcett wrote in his last verified dispatch, "The forest here is not as we have known it. The very rivers seem to flow differently from day to day, and our guides speak of paths that exist only when the forest wishes them to be found." More recent disappearances follow similar patterns. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a botanist from the University of California who vanished in 2003 near the Javari Valley, had sent GPS coordinates to his research team that placed him in an area his satellite phone indicated was over 200 miles from his actual location. His final radio transmission, recorded by Brazilian authorities, consists largely of static, but enhanced audio analysis reveals what sounds like his voice saying, "They've been waiting for us. How did they know we were coming?" The search for Rodriguez involved Brazilian military units, indigenous trackers, and international search teams equipped with thermal imaging and ground-penetrating radar. They found his campsite undisturbed as if he had simply walked away moments before, but the GPS unit showed impossible readings coordinates that placed the device simultaneously in multiple locations across South America. Even more puzzling are the cases of partial return. Explorers who disappear for weeks or months then emerge from the forest with gaps in their memory and stories that contradict known geography. Maria Santos, a Brazilian geologist who vanished for 6 weeks in 1998, was found walking along a highway nearly 400 miles from where she had disappeared. She claimed to have spent the time in a research facility built into a cliff face, where she worked alongside people who spoke perfect Portuguese, but claimed to have never heard of Brazil. Medical examination revealed that Santos had lost 30 pounds during her disappearance, but showed no signs of malnutrition or dehydration. More puzzling, her hair had grown only half the expected amount for 6 weeks, as if her biological processes had slowed considerably. She described the facility as like a university, but ancient and modern at the same time, with laboratories that grew their equipment rather than manufacturing it. Santos's account was dismissed by authorities as a trauma response to becoming lost in the forest, but her detailed drawings of the facility and its inhabitants were later compared to similar descriptions from other partial return cases across the Amazon basin. The architectural details, the clothing designs, even the facial features of the inhabitants showed remarkable consistency across accounts, separated by decades and hundreds of miles. The indigenous peoples who live in the regions where these disappearances occur offer explanations that do not appear in official reports. They speak of the choosers, beings who evaluate outsiders and determine whether they are suitable for contact with the inner forest's true inhabitants. Most are judged unsuitable and are guided away through a combination of disorientation, equipment failure, and psychological pressure that makes them eager to return to familiar territory. But some, according to these accounts, are chosen for temporary inclusion, brought into the deeper forest to serve specific purposes before being returned to the surface world with their memories carefully edited to remove details that might lead others to the hidden settlements. The process is described not as kidnapping, but as a form of recruitment, with the forest's inhabitants occasionally needing surface dwellers who possess particular skills or knowledge. Carlos Mendoza, a shaman of the Aqua people, explains the process. The forest has its own needs, its own purposes that we surface dwellers do not always understand. Sometimes it requires someone with knowledge of the outside world, someone who can help bridge the gap between what was and what must be. These people are taken not as prisoners, but as temporary consultants. When their work is finished, they are returned, but the forest ensures they remember only what is safe for them to remember. The concept of selective memory editing might sound like science fiction, but ethnobotanists have documented numerous Amazonian plants with powerful psychoactive properties that can induce highly specific amnesias. The ayahuasqueros traditional plant medicine practitioners speak of vines that can erase specific memories while leaving others intact, roots that can implant false recollections so vivid they seem like genuine experiences. Dr. Dennis McKenna, an ethnobotanist who has studied Amazonian plant medicines for over 4 decades, notes that the sophistication of indigenous knowledge regarding consciousness-altering plants exceeds anything available in modern neuroscience. These shamans have techniques for manipulating memory, perception, and consciousness that we can barely comprehend, let alone replicate. If there were a hidden civilization with access to this knowledge base, enhanced over centuries of development, they could indeed control what visitors remember and what they forget. The technology failures that consistently plague expeditions in certain areas of the Amazon add another layer to the mystery. GPS systems that provide impossible readings, satellite phones that connect to networks that should not exist, cameras that capture images of landscapes that do not match their recorded locations. While equipment failure is expected in harsh jungle conditions, the patterns of malfunction suggest something more systematic than random breakdown. In 2015, a joint research expedition from MIT and the Brazilian National Institute for Space Research was testing new ground-penetrating radar technology in the Acre region, when their equipment began producing readings that senior engineer David Park described as physically impossible. The radar showed vast hollow spaces beneath the forest floor, connected by corridors that seemed to form geometric patterns extending far beyond the range of their instruments. The readings suggested caverns the size of aircraft hangars, arranged in configurations that looked almost like city blocks, Park reported. But when we tried to verify the data, our equipment began showing different readings each time we scanned the same area. It was as if the structures were moving, or as if something was interfering with our sensors. The expedition was cut short when team members began experiencing severe headaches and disorientation. Upon return to their base camp, they discovered that their digital storage devices had been corrupted, with the most detailed scans replaced by what appeared to be random noise. The only intact data showed conventional geological formations with no unusual features. Similar technological interference has been reported by dozens of research teams over the past 2 decades. Drones that fly in programmed patterns but record flight paths that deviate from their GPS logs. Seismic equipment that detects underground structures one day and finds only solid earth the next. Radio communications that pick up transmissions in unknown languages from sources that triangulation places deep beneath the forest floor. The Brazilian military acknowledges these anomalies in classified reports obtained through Freedom of Information requests, but attributes them to natural electromagnetic phenomena associated with mineral deposits. However, geologists familiar with the Amazon's mineral composition note that the documented interference patterns do not match any known natural sources. Perhaps most unsettling are the reports of organized deterrence incidents, where lost expeditions are not simply abandoned to their fate, but actively guided away from sensitive areas through methods that suggest intelligence and planning. Teams report finding their campsites rearranged overnight, with equipment moved to form arrows pointing back towards safer territory. Trails that were clear the day before become blocked by fallen trees, whose cut marks appear too precise for natural collapse. In some cases, the deterrence takes more direct forms. Groups report encounters with individuals who speak perfect English or Portuguese, but claim to represent forest management services that do not exist in any government database. These individuals, described as unusually tall and wearing clothing that appears to be woven from plant fibers, provide detailed warnings about dangerous conditions ahead and offer to guide intruders back to safe areas. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, an anthropologist who encountered such individuals during a 2019 research expedition, describes the meeting as profoundly unsettling, not because of what they said, but because of how they said it. They knew our names, our research objectives, even personal details about our families. They spoke with an authority that suggested they had been monitoring us far longer than should have been possible. The guides provided by these mysterious forest managers demonstrate knowledge of the terrain that exceeds even indigenous expertise. They lead groups along routes that do not appear on satellite imagery, but provide the fastest possible path to civilization. They warn of weather changes that are later confirmed by meteorological services, and they seem to know the exact locations of hazards that would otherwise take days to discover. When questioned about their authority or organization, the guides provide answers that sound official but prove impossible to verify. They claim to work for environmental protection services, biological survey departments, or indigenous rights organizations that have no record of their existence. Attempts to follow them after reaching safety invariably fail. They vanish into the forest with a thoroughness that suggests intimate knowledge of hiding places no outsider could find. The pattern of disappearances, guided returns, and active deterrence points to something more systematic than random forest hazards. It suggests an organized effort to control access to specific areas of the Amazon, implemented by people with resources, knowledge, and authority that extend far beyond what surface governments acknowledge. Whether these forest managers represent a hidden civilization, a secret government program, or something else entirely remains unclear. What is certain is that large areas of the Amazon basin are under protection by forces that remain invisible to satellite surveillance, official mapping, and conventional exploration. For those who venture into these territories without permission, the forest itself seems to become an active opponent, employing strategies that range from subtle misdirection to complete disappearance. And for the few who are chosen for temporary inclusion in whatever lies beyond the green veil, the return journey brings with it more questions than answers, and memories that feel simultaneously real and impossible. The mystery deepens with each disappearance, each partial return, each technological failure that suggests the Amazon holds secrets far greater than its official biodiversity surveys reveal. In the depths of the world's largest rainforest, someone or something continues to guard boundaries that do not appear on any map. Using methods that challenge our understanding of what is possible in a world we thought we had thoroughly explored. In the deepest reaches of the Amazon, where satellite signals fade and GPS coordinates become meaningless, communication operates according to rules that challenge Western understanding of language itself. Here, information travels not through electromagnetic waves or digital networks, but through the living architecture of the forest, a biological internet that has been operating for millennia before humans invented their first electronic circuit. The indigenous shamans who serve as interfaces with this system describe it as the green speaking, a form of communication that uses plants as both medium and message. The indigenous shamans who serve as interfaces with this system describe it as the green speaking, a form of communication that uses plants as both medium and message. Unlike human languages that separate meaning from messenger, the green speaking embeds information directly into the cellular structure of leaves, roots, and vines, creating messages that must be consumed rather than simply heard or read. Dr. Wade Davis, the renowned ethnobotanist and author, first documented this phenomenon during his studies with the Waorani people of Ecuador in the 1980s. He describes the process. I watched a shaman prepare what appeared to be a simple leaf mixture, but the preparation followed protocols more complex than any pharmaceutical process I had witnessed. Each plant was harvested at specific times, from specific locations, and combined in patterns that seemed to contain coded information. When consumed, the mixture produced not just psychoactive effects, but specific knowledge information about distant events, the location of game animals, even details about people the shaman had never met. The Warani elder who guided Davis's research, Moy, explained that the plants themselves carried messages from what he called the first people beings, who had learned to speak through the forest's root networks long before humans developed vocal language. According to Moy, these first people had never left the forest. They had simply learned to communicate so perfectly through plant consciousness that they no longer needed physical form as surface dwellers understand it. This concept of consciousness embedded in vegetation gains unexpected support from recent discoveries in plant neurobiology. Research by scientists like Dr. Stefano Mancuso at the University of Florence has revealed that plants possess information processing capabilities that rival simple neural networks. They can learn from experience, make decisions based on environmental input, and even exhibit what appears to be memory storage and recall. But in the Amazon, these capabilities appear to have been enhanced far beyond what mainstream botany considers possible. Shamans describe plants that serve as living libraries, storing not just genetic information but cultural knowledge, historical records, and complex technical specifications. These teaching plants can supposedly download their contents directly into human consciousness through carefully prepared botanical preparations. The process requires extensive preparation on the part of the human recipient. Shamanic training in the Amazon basin involves years of dietary restrictions, meditation practices, and graduated exposure to plant medicines that gradually rewire human neurology to interface with botanical information systems. Practitioners describe the end result as gaining access to a vast database of knowledge that exists within the forest's collective consciousness. Yashir Ramirez, a curandero from the Shipibo people who has trained dozens of Western students in these techniques, explains, "The plants are not just medicine. They are teachers, libraries, communication networks. But to access their knowledge, you must first learn their language. This is not like learning Spanish or English. You must change how your mind works, how your brain processes information. Only then can you hear what the forest has been trying to tell humanity for thousands of years." The training involves consuming specific plant preparations that allegedly reconfigure neural pathways to become compatible with botanical consciousness. Students report experiences of downloading vast amounts of information during these sessions, technical knowledge about plant chemistry, historical accounts of pre-Columbian civilizations, and complex philosophical concepts that seem to originate from non-human intelligence. Dr. Benny Shannon, a cognitive psychologist from Hebrew University who has studied these phenomena for over 30 years, notes that the information accessed through plant medicines often proves accurate in ways that suggest genuine transmission rather than hallucination. Participants consistently report acquiring knowledge that they could not have possessed beforehand, details about plant biochemistry that are later confirmed by laboratory analysis, historical information that is verified through archaeological research, even technical solutions to problems in fields like engineering or medicine. The consistency and accuracy of this information challenges conventional understanding of how knowledge can be transmitted. But the most intriguing aspect of the green speaking is not the knowledge it can provide, but the network through which that knowledge travels. Indigenous shamans describe a communication system that connects plant communities across the entire Amazon basin, allowing information to travel from the Andes to the Atlantic coast through underground root networks and atmospheric chemical signals. Recent scientific research has confirmed the existence of extensive mycorrhizal networks that connect trees across vast distances, but shamanic accounts describe capabilities that exceed anything documented by conventional botany. They speak of urgent messages traveling through the network at speeds that approach electronic communication, of plant communities that can predict weather patterns weeks in advance by sensing atmospheric changes, and of botanical early warning systems that alert distant forests to approaching threats. The Kaiapó people of central Brazil have developed perhaps the most sophisticated interface with these plant communication networks. Their shamans, known as Wayang, serve as human translators for botanical intelligence, receiving information through plant medicines and converting it into actionable knowledge for their communities. This system has allowed the Kayapo to maintain detailed awareness of environmental conditions across thousands of square miles of rainforest, often providing warnings of droughts, floods, or invasions long before government agencies detect these threats. Wang Eldabimoro describes the process. The forest sees everything, every change in temperature, every shift in rainfall, every movement of animals or people, but it sees with plant time, plant understanding. My job is to translate this knowledge into human time, human needs. When the forest speaks of change coming in 7 turnings of the leaves, I must understand this means approximately 2 seasons in human time. When it warns of metal birds that drink rivers, I know this means mining operations that will pollute water sources. The accuracy of these botanical forecasts has impressed even skeptical researchers. Dr. Thomas Lovejoy, often called the godfather of biodiversity, worked with Kayapo communities for over 2 decades and witnessed predictions that proved correct with uncanny accuracy. They would warn of droughts months before meteorological services detected the conditions. They predicted the arrival of new diseases, the migration patterns of animal species, even the outcomes of political decisions that would affect their territory. When I asked how they knew these things, they simply said the forest told them. But perhaps the most startling aspect of the greenspeaking is the suggestion that it operates as a 2-way communication system. Not only can human practitioners receive information from plant networks, but they can also input data, sending messages to distant locations through botanical channels. Shamans describe the ability to communicate with colleagues hundreds of miles away by encoding messages in plant preparations that are then absorbed by the root networks and transmitted to intended recipients. This biological messaging system allegedly operates through a process called plant dreaming, in which prepared botanical compounds induce shared consciousness states among participants at different locations. During these states, individuals report meeting in virtual spaces that exist within plant consciousness, allowing for real-time communication regardless of physical distance. Dr. Luis Eduardo Luna, an anthropologist who has studied ayahuasca traditions for over 4 decades, has documented numerous cases of apparent long-distance communication through plant medicines. I have witnessed shamans in Peru accurately describe events occurring simultaneously in Colombia, received through what they call vine telephone. The details they provide, specific names, locations, even conversations, are later confirmed when communication is restored through conventional means. The mechanism remains unclear, but the phenomenon is well documented. The implications of such capabilities extend far beyond indigenous culture. If plant networks can indeed transmit complex information across vast distances, they represent a communication infrastructure that has been operating in the Amazon for millennia, undetected by mainstream science. More intriguingly, if human consciousness can interface with this network through botanical preparations, it suggests the possibility of accessing a vast database of environmental and cultural knowledge that exist within the forest's living memory. This raises profound questions about the nature of intelligence itself. If plants can store, process and transmit information with the sophistication described by indigenous practitioners, then the Amazon rainforest may be less an ecosystem than a vast biological computer, with individual trees and vines serving as processing nodes in a network of extraordinary complexity. And if this network has been guided and enhanced by conscious beings over thousands of years, as shamanic traditions suggest, then the forest may serve as both the medium and the repository for a civilization that has chosen to embed itself so thoroughly in the natural world that it has become indistinguishable from nature itself. For those who learn to speak the green language, the Amazon reveals itself not as a wilderness to be conquered, but as a vast library to be read, a communication network to be accessed, and perhaps, most remarkably, a form of consciousness to be joined. In this view, the forest's apparent resistance to outside intrusion becomes not primitive territorialism, but the defensive response of an intelligence protecting itself from those who lack the sophistication to understand what they have encountered. The messages continue to flow through root and vine, leaf and flower, carrying information that spans centuries and connects every corner of the rainforest in a web of communication that makes human internet systems seem crude by comparison. For those who master the language of leaves, the Amazon becomes not a place to visit, but a consciousness to inhabit, and perhaps, for those judged worthy, a civilization to join. 200 feet above the Amazon floor, where the emergent layer of the rainforest reaches toward the sky, lies a world that few ground-dwelling humans have ever seen. Here, in the realm of harpy eagles and three-toed sloths, indigenous accounts speak of structures that challenge conventional understanding of architecture, engineering, and urban planning itself. These are the Tree City settlements that exist not despite the forest canopy, but as extensions of it, grown rather than built, shaped over generations into forms that serve human habitation while remaining completely integrated with the living ecosystem that supports them. To understand these aerial communities is to abandon Western concepts of construction and embrace a form of architecture that treats buildings not as impositions upon nature, but as collaborations with it. The engineering principles behind canopy cities emerge from thousands of years of indigenous observation of how rainforest species create their own aerial infrastructure. In the Amazon, many plants never touch the ground. They exist entirely in the canopy, using other trees as structural support while contributing their own strength to the community. Epiphytes, strangler figs, and aerial root systems create vast interconnected networks that are stronger and more flexible than any single tree could be alone. Indigenous architects working in the canopy apply these same principles to human habitation. Rather than cutting trees to build with dead wood, they guide living trees to grow into desired forms, creating structures that become stronger and more elaborate with each passing year. The process requires understanding tree biology at a level that modern forestry schools rarely attempt to teach. Master builder Chana Bain of the Huniquin people explains the technique. Each tree has its own personality, its own way of growing, its own desires for where it wants to reach toward the sun. Our job is not to fight these desires, but to negotiate with them. We show the tree how growing in certain directions will benefit not just itself, but the entire forest community. In return, the tree provides us with living space that grows more beautiful and more comfortable with each season. The process begins with seedlings carefully selected not just for species, but for individual characteristics that make them suitable for architectural purposes. These seedlings are planted in patterns that will, over decades, create the foundation structure for aerial communities. As they grow, they are gently guided through techniques that include selective pruning, careful bending, and grafting different species together to combine their strengths. The result, after 50 to 100 years of patient cultivation, are structures that bear little resemblance to conventional buildings. Walls may be formed from interwoven branches that continue to live and grow, creating surfaces that are both strong and flexible. Floors might consist of broad, flattened root systems that provide stable platforms while allowing water and nutrients to continue flowing through the tree's vascular system. Roofing in canopy cities is often provided by the leaves themselves, but not in the haphazard way that natural forest cover might suggest. Master shapers can train broadleaf species to grow in overlapping patterns that shed rain efficiently while allowing controlled amounts of sunlight to filter through. These living roofs continue to photosynthesize, contributing energy to the tree buildings and helping to regulate temperature and humidity in the living spaces below. The scale of these aerial cities, according to indigenous accounts, can be extraordinary. The Kayapo people describe canopy communities that can house up to 2,000 residents across multiple levels of the forest, connected by bridges and walkways that span from tree to tree across distances that would challenge conventional engineering. These bridges are not constructed from cut materials, but grown from vines and flexible branches trained to bear weight while maintaining their connection to the parent plants. Dr. Meg Lohman, known as Canopy Meg for her pioneering research in rainforest treetops, has documented some of the indigenous techniques for aerial construction. What I observed challenged every assumption I had about the limitations of biological architecture These builders work with the forest's own structural principles, creating human habitations that actually strengthen the ecosystem rather than damaging it. The buildings live, grow, and evolve, becoming more sophisticated over time rather than deteriorating. The cities themselves are organized according to principles that mirror forest ecology. Rather than the grid patterns favored by ground-based urban planning, canopy cities follow organic flows that work with the natural distribution of suitable trees and the movement of air currents through the forest. Residential areas are distributed to take advantage of optimal light conditions, while community spaces are located at natural gathering points where multiple trees create cathedral-like clearings. Transportation within canopy cities relies on networks of aerial pathways that indigenous peoples have perfected over centuries. These routes take advantage of natural branch highways, supplemented by trained vines that provide handholds and rope-like guides for moving through the three-dimensional space. Master navigators can travel for miles through the canopy without ever touching the ground, moving along routes that are invisible to ground-based observers. The Achuar people have developed perhaps the most sophisticated system of canopy transportation, using a combination of natural and enhanced pathways that allow rapid communication and travel across their territory. Runners can carry messages through the treetop routes in a fraction of the time required for ground-based travel, while remaining completely hidden from aerial observation. But the most remarkable aspect of canopy cities may be their complete invisibility to conventional detection methods. Satellite imagery shows only unbroken forest canopy, with no hint of the human communities that may exist within the green ceiling. The buildings, being composed entirely of living trees, generate the same thermal and spectral signatures as natural forest, making them undetectable to remote sensing technology. This invisibility is not accidental, but represents sophisticated understanding of camouflage principles that military strategists are only beginning to appreciate. By building with living materials that continue their natural functions, canopy architects create structures that are invisible to virtually all forms of technological surveillance, while remaining fully functional as human habitation. The daily life of canopy city residents, as described in indigenous accounts, operates according to rhythms that mirror the vertical ecosystem of the rainforest. Different activities take place at different levels, taking advantage of the varying conditions of light, humidity, and air circulation that characterize the forest's vertical zones. Upper levels, closest to direct sunlight, are reserved for activities that require bright light and good air circulation workshops, where craftspeople create tools and art, drying areas for food and materials, and lookout posts that provide views across the forest canopy to the horizon. These areas are also used for communication with other communities, using systems of reflected sunlight and smoke signals that can transmit complex messages across vast distances. Middle levels, where the bulk of human activity occurs, provide optimal conditions for residential living. Here, the combination of filtered sunlight and natural air conditioning created by transpiring leaves maintains comfortable temperatures throughout the day. Sleeping areas, communal kitchens, and social spaces take advantage of broad platform areas created by the intersection of major branches. Lower levels, closer to the forest floor but still well above ground, are used for storage, workshops that require cooler conditions, and connection points with ground-based activities. These areas also serve as defensive positions, providing concealed vantage points from which residents can observe ground-level activity without being detected. The agricultural systems that support canopy cities represent perhaps the most sophisticated example of three-dimensional farming ever developed. Rather than clearing forest for conventional agriculture, canopy farmers work within the existing ecosystem, enhancing natural food production while maintaining forest integrity. Food plants are integrated throughout the vertical structure of the city, taking advantage of different light conditions and microclimates to grow a diverse array of crops. Fruits and nuts are produced by trees that also serve structural functions, while vegetables and medicinal plants grow in carefully tended gardens that occupy spaces between major branches. The soil for these aerial gardens is created through sophisticated composting systems that recycle all organic waste from the community. Dead leaves, food scraps, and human waste are processed through biological systems that convert waste into rich growing medium, creating closed-loop systems that require no external inputs while producing no environmentally harmful outputs. Water management in canopy cities takes advantage of the forest's natural hydrological systems while enhancing them for human use. Rainwater is collected through carefully shaped leaf systems that funnel precipitation into storage containers made from hollow gourds and specialized plant materials. This water is then distributed throughout the community through networks of bamboo pipes and plant-based conduits. Grey water from washing and cooking is processed through biological filters that clean it sufficiently for agricultural use, while human waste is composted through systems that eliminate pathogens while preserving nutrients. The result is water management that produces no pollution while enhancing the forest's natural water cycle. Energy needs in canopy cities are met through biological systems that convert sunlight, chemical energy from plant processes, and even mechanical energy from wind and moving water into forms useful for human activities. While these communities do not use electricity in the conventional sense, they have developed sophisticated techniques for storing and directing various forms of natural energy. Bioluminescent plants, carefully cultivated for maximum light output, provide illumination during dark hours. Fermentation processes generate heat for cooking and warmth. Mechanical devices powered by flowing water or wind provide energy for tools and equipment. The result is an energy system that produces no pollution while enhancing rather than depleting the natural environment. The defense systems of canopy cities take advantage of their natural concealment while adding layers of protection that use the forest itself as an ally. Residents can quickly disappear into the canopy using knowledge of branch networks and vine highways that would take outsiders years to master. The cities themselves can be rapidly camouflaged even further, with movable screens of leaves and branches that can make inhabited areas appear completely natural within minutes. But perhaps the most sophisticated defense is biological. Canopy cities reportedly maintain communities of insects and other small animals that serve as early warning systems, detecting the approach of intruders long before they could be observed by human sentries. These biological sentinels can distinguish between friendly and hostile visitors, providing graduated responses that range from subtle discouragement to active deterrence. The social organization of canopy cities reflects the ecological principles that govern their physical structure. Like forest ecosystems, these communities operate through networks of interdependence rather than hierarchical chains of command. Different families and groups specialize in various aspects of community life tree shaping: food production, tool making, defense, communication with other settlements, while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. Leadership in canopy communities is typically distributed among individuals who have demonstrated expertise in different areas, rather than concentrated in single rulers. Decisions are made through consensus processes that mirror the way forest ecosystems reach equilibrium through multiple feedback loops rather than top-down control. This distributed leadership system allows canopy cities to respond quickly to opportunities and threats, while maintaining the stability that comes from having multiple perspectives input into every important decision. It also ensures that knowledge and skills are distributed throughout the community rather than concentrated in a few individuals, making the society more resilient to disruption. The connection between different canopy cities creates networks that span hundreds of miles of rainforest, linked by aerial highways known only to initiated travelers. These networks allow for trade, communication, and mutual support on a scale that challenges assumptions about the limitations of pre-industrial transportation systems. Messages can travel through the canopy networks faster than ground-based methods would allow, carried by runners who know every branch and vine of the aerial highways. Trade goods move along the same routes, allowing communities to specialize in particular products while maintaining access to resources from across the Amazon basin. Perhaps most remarkably, these networks seem to operate with a level of coordination that suggests central planning or at least sophisticated communication systems. Warnings about threats, information about weather patterns, and coordination of responses to environmental challenges flow through the canopy networks with efficiency that rivals modern communication systems. For surface dwellers accustomed to cities of concrete and steel, the concept of urban areas that are completely alive, growing and changing with each season, challenges fundamental assumptions about what constitutes civilization. But for the residents of the canopy cities, these aerial communities represent the ultimate achievement of human architecture: buildings that enhance rather than degrade their environment, cities that grow more beautiful and more functional with each passing year, and communities that demonstrate humanity's potential to live in true partnership with the natural world. In the green cathedral of the Amazon canopy, these cities continue to grow and evolve, invisible to satellites but vibrant with human life, proving that the most advanced architecture may be the kind that never separates itself from the living world that sustains it. In the vast cathedral of the Amazon, where every leaf whispers secrets and every root carries messages across impossible distances, there exists a presence that indigenous peoples have acknowledged for millennia, but that science has never been able to quantify, measure, or definitively prove. This presence, known by dozens of names across as many tribes, the forest keepers, the green wardens, the breath of trees, seems to function as both immune system and intelligence network for the rainforest itself. These guardians operate not as separate beings imposing their will upon the forest, but as expressions of the forest's own consciousness made manifest in forms that can interact with the human world when necessary. They are the Amazon's method of protecting itself from disruption, of maintaining the delicate balances that allow the world's most complex ecosystem to function as a single, integrated organism. The role of guardian is not one of passive watching, but of active intervention in the countless small decisions that determine whether the forest thrives or declines. They guide the growth of crucial species, direct the flow of nutrients through soil networks, influence weather patterns through strategic plantings, and most importantly, monitor and regulate contact between the forest's hidden inhabitants and the outside world. Dr. Antonia Monteiro, a Brazilian ecologist who has worked with indigenous communities for over 30 years, describes encounters with what he calls forest management personnel, individuals who appear at critical moments during research expeditions, possessing authority and knowledge that cannot be explained through conventional organizational structures. They know things they shouldn't know, Monteiro explains. They can predict weather changes weeks in advance. They're aware of animal migration patterns that our radio tracking hasn't detected. They know the health status of individual trees across thousands of acres. When you ask who they work for, they say simply, the forest. When you ask how they learned what they know, they say the forest taught them. After 30 years of work in the Amazon, I'm no longer certain these aren't the most accurate answers possible. The guardian presence manifests most clearly at moments of crisis or transition, when the forest faces threats that require responses beyond its normal adaptive mechanisms. During the massive fires that swept through Amazon in 2019, indigenous reports described coordinated efforts to create fire breaks and protect seed banks that seemed to operate with strategic sophistication that exceeded any known firefighting capabilities. Pilots flying over affected areas reported seeing figures moving through the forest ahead of the fires, apparently creating cleared areas that later proved crucial in stopping the blazes' advance. These fire breaks appeared too quickly and too precisely to have been created by conventional methods, yet they consistently appeared at exactly the right locations to minimize damage to critical forest areas. Maria Solital, an environmental activist who worked on fire recovery efforts, documented several encounters with these fire prevention teams. They appeared at our camp before dawn, maybe 20 people, carrying tools I didn't recognize but that were clearly designed for forest management. They spoke perfect Portuguese but said they were from forest services. Thus, when I asked which agency, they said there was no agency. They worked directly with the trees. I thought it was a language problem until I saw what they could do. The teams demonstrated techniques for creating fire breaks that involved not cutting trees, but encouraging them to shed their leaves and thin their bark in strategic patterns that created natural fire barriers. They worked with a speed and precision that suggested decades of experience. Yet they appeared to be young adults who claimed to have lived their entire lives in the forest. They knew exactly which trees to treat and how to treat them, Xolotl continues. They could touch a tree and somehow cause it to change its growth pattern, creating gaps in the canopy that channeled wind and moisture in ways that prevented fire spread. When the fires reached these areas, they simply stopped, as if they had hit invisible walls. When asked about their training, the team members provided answers that sounded official but proved impossible to verify. They claimed to work for environmental protection services that had no record of their existence, to have graduated from forestry programs at universities that had no record of their enrollment, to be funded by conservation organizations that had never heard of them. More puzzling, attempts to follow these teams after the immediate crisis passed invariably failed. They would disappear into the forest with a thoroughness that suggested not just intimate knowledge of hiding places, but access to resources and infrastructure that remained invisible to outside observation. The Guardian's intervention extends beyond crisis response to what appears to be long-term environmental management on a scale that challenges conventional understanding of what is possible without massive industrial infrastructure. Indigenous accounts describe coordinated efforts to guide species migration, direct the evolution of plant communities, and even influence weather patterns through strategic forest management. The Kayapo people describe observing Guardian teams working to establish what they call climate gardens, carefully designed forest areas that are optimized for specific atmospheric effects. Trees are planted and shaped to create optimal air circulation patterns, soil is enhanced to maximize carbon sequestration, and plant communities are designed to generate particular humidity and temperature conditions that influence local weather. According to Kayapo elder Rauni Matuktir, these climate gardens operate as a network across the Amazon basin, working together to maintain atmospheric conditions that support not just the rainforest, but global weather patterns. The forest breathes for the whole earth, but it cannot breathe properly if it is not maintained. The Guardians understand which trees create which kinds of breath, and they ensure that the forest's breathing remains strong enough to reach every corner of the world. The techniques used in this atmospheric management reportedly involve both traditional indigenous knowledge and innovations that suggest access to scientific understanding that exceeds what is available in published research. Guardian teams are said to work with mycorrhizal networks in ways that allow them to direct nutrient flows across vast distances, essentially using the forest's root systems as a continent-spanning infrastructure for ecological management. But perhaps the most crucial function of the Guardians is their role in protecting the forest's most sensitive secrets, the locations and inhabitants of the hidden communities that have chosen to remain separate from the surface world. This protection operates through multiple layers, from subtle psychological deterrence to active misdirection to, in extreme cases, forcible removal of unwelcome intruders. The psychological deterrence techniques employed by the Guardians take advantage of the forest's natural ability to induce disorientation and anxiety in unprepared visitors. Certain areas of the Amazon have been known for centuries to produce feelings of unease, confusion, and urgent desire to leave in people who enter them. While these effects are often attributed to natural causes, unusual atmospheric conditions, infrasound from waterfalls or psychoactive compounds in the air indigenous accounts suggest that these responses are carefully cultivated and enhanced. Guardian teams reportedly maintain discouragement zones around sensitive areas, using combinations of plant chemistry, sound manipulation, and subtle environmental modifications to create conditions that make most visitors eager to leave. These zones are designed to affect intruders without causing permanent harm, creating what amounts to a biological security system that protects hidden communities without revealing their existence. For visitors who prove resistant to psychological deterrence, the Guardians employ more direct methods. Researchers and explorers report encounters with individuals who possess detailed knowledge of their missions and backgrounds, who can predict their intended routes with uncanny accuracy, and who consistently appear at precisely the right moments to redirect unwelcome expeditions. Dr. James Sullivan, a hydrologist who attempted to map underground water systems in the Acre region, describes a series of encounters that effectively ended his research. Every time we approached areas where our instruments suggested significant underground water flow, we would meet people who claimed to be conducting their own research in the same areas. They had official-looking permits, sophisticated equipment, and detailed knowledge of the local hydrology. They were always perfectly polite, but they made it clear that our presence was not welcome and that we should find other areas to study. When Sullivan attempted to verify the credentials of these competing researchers, he discovered that their permits were issued by agencies that didn't exist. Their equipment came from manufacturers that had no record of the sales, and their research was funded by organizations that had never heard of them. It was like encountering a parallel scientific establishment that operated according to the same rules as legitimate research, but existed in a reality that didn't quite connect with the world I knew, Sullivan explains. They knew more about the areas they were protecting than I did. They had better equipment, and they clearly had resources I couldn't match. After the third encounter, I realized I was outclassed and moved my research to other regions. The Guardian's knowledge of outside world activities suggests intelligence-gathering capabilities that extend far beyond the forest itself. They seem to know about planned expeditions before they begin, to have access to government databases and academic research records, and to maintain communication networks that allow coordination across vast distances in real time. This intelligence network reportedly operates through a combination of conventional human contacts and more exotic methods that take advantage of the forest's own information systems. Guardian teams are said to include individuals who have learned to interface with the Amazon's biological communication networks, allowing them to detect disturbances and threats across thousands of square miles of rainforest. The training required to serve as a guardian apparently involves decades of preparation that combines traditional indigenous knowledge with advanced understanding of forest ecology, human psychology, and technological systems. Guardian trainees are said to spend years learning to communicate with plant and animal communities, to navigate the forest's aerial highways, and to function as diplomatic representatives between hidden communities and the outside world. But the most remarkable aspect of Guardian training may be the development of what indigenous peoples call forest sight, the ability to perceive the Amazon not as a collection of individual trees and animals, but as a single, integrated organism with its own needs, desires, and intelligence. Masters of forest sight can reportedly sense threats to forest health from vast distances, predict environmental changes months in advance, and coordinate responses to challenges that require action across multiple locations simultaneously. This level of environmental awareness would allow Guardian teams to function as both early warning system and rapid response force for the entire Amazon ecosystem. They could detect illegal logging operations before significant damage occurred, predict and prepare for droughts or floods, and coordinate conservation efforts across political boundaries that have no meaning within the forest's own organizational systems. The Guardian's most challenging responsibility may be managing the gradual revelation of hidden forest communities to a surface world that grows more technologically sophisticated each year. Satellite surveillance, drone reconnaissance, and advanced sensor networks make complete concealment increasingly difficult, requiring ever more sophisticated countermeasures to maintain the boundaries between hidden and revealed worlds. Indigenous accounts suggest that this process is not accidental, but represents a carefully planned transition that will eventually lead to controlled contact between surface and hidden civilizations. The Guardians serve as advanced scouts in this process, evaluating surface world readiness for contact and preparing both sides for eventual integration. This preparation involves not just monitoring technological capabilities, but assessing ethical and spiritual development. The Guardians reportedly maintain extensive files on surface world individuals who demonstrate the qualities that would make them suitable for contact environmental consciousness, respect for indigenous wisdom, and the ability to keep sensitive information confidential. When such individuals are identified, they may find themselves guided toward encounters that seem accidental, but are actually carefully orchestrated. A research expedition that stumbles upon unusual plant communities, a lost hiker who encounters unexplained assistance, a scientist whose equipment begins producing anomalous readings. All may be part of a gradual process of disclosure that allows surface dwellers to adapt slowly to the reality of hidden forest civilizations. For those who prove themselves trustworthy through these initial contacts, deeper levels of access may become available, but always under the watchful protection of the Guardians, who ensure that the forest's secrets are revealed only to those who will use them wisely, and only at the pace that allows both worlds to adjust to their expanding relationship. In the vast green silence of the Amazon, the Guardians continue their patient work protecting, guiding, and gradually preparing for the day when the boundaries between hidden and revealed worlds may finally dissolve. Until that time, they remain as they have always been, the forest's own intelligence made manifest, ensuring that humanity's encounter with the Amazon's deepest secrets unfolds according to wisdom rather than mere curiosity, and that the treasures of the rainforest are preserved for those who prove worthy to receive them. Beneath the endless canopy of the Amazon rainforest, the earth itself breathes in rhythms that regulate not only local weather patterns, but atmospheric conditions across the entire planet. This is not merely the poetic metaphor it might appear to be, but a description of biological and atmospheric processes so vast and complex that mainstream climatology has only begun to understand their scope and significance. Indigenous peoples have long recognized the Amazon as the lungs of the earth, but their understanding goes far beyond simple oxygen production. They describe the forest as a conscious breathing system that inhales and exhales in patterns designed to maintain atmospheric balance, not just regionally, but globally. And if their accounts are accurate, this breathing system is not entirely natural. It has been guided and enhanced by intelligence that understands Earth's atmospheric needs on a scale that encompasses centuries, perhaps millennia. Dr. Carlos Nobre, one of Brazil's leading climate scientists, has documented atmospheric phenomena in the Amazon that challenge conventional understanding of how regional ecosystems influence global weather patterns. The Amazon doesn't just produce oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide, he explains. It functions as a vast atmospheric processor, taking in air from across South America and releasing it with a completely different chemical and energetic composition. The forest is essentially terraforming the planet's atmosphere on a continuous basis. The scale of this atmospheric processing is staggering. Each day, the Amazon rainforest releases approximately 20 billion tons of water vapor into the atmosphere, more than the flow of the Amazon River itself. But this is not simply evaporation. It is a complex process that involves chemical interactions between thousands of plant species, each contributing specific compounds to the atmospheric mixture. Indigenous shamans who work with plant medicines describe experiencing the forest's breathing as a tangible phenomenon during their ceremonies. They speak of sensing vast inhalations and exhalations that seem to coordinate with their own respiratory rhythms, creating a feeling of breathing in synchrony with the earth itself. These experiences, while subjective, align remarkably with scientific measurements of atmospheric fluctuations that occur across the Amazon basin. The Shipibo people have developed perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of these breathing patterns, incorporating them into their traditional medicine practices. Shipibo healers time their ceremonies to coordinate with what they call the forest's great breaths, atmospheric cycles that occur on hourly, daily, and seasonal scales. They claim that plant medicines are most effective when taken during specific phases of these breathing cycles, when the atmospheric conditions optimize the absorption and distribution of psychoactive compounds. Master healer Don Carlos Amaringo explains, "The forest breathes in many rhythms, quick breaths like a hummingbird's heartbeat, long breaths that take a full day, and the greatest breaths that take entire seasons. Each breath has its purpose, its gift to offer. Our medicines work best when we breathe together with the forest, when human breath and forest breath become one breathing." Recent atmospheric research has begun to document cycles that correspond remarkably to indigenous descriptions of forest breathing patterns. Satellite measurements show regular fluctuations in humidity, temperature, and chemical composition that occur across multiple timescales, from minutes to months. These fluctuations appear to be generated not by random weather processes, but by coordinated responses from forest vegetation that suggest sophisticated atmospheric management. Dr. Susan Trumbore, director of the Max Planck Institute for Biogeochemistry, has studied these coordinated atmospheric responses for over a decade. We're seeing evidence that the forest can respond to atmospheric conditions thousands of miles away, adjusting its own emissions to compensate for chemical imbalances or temperature variations. It's as if the Amazon is monitoring global atmospheric conditions and making real-time adjustments to help maintain planetary equilibrium. The mechanisms behind this atmospheric management involve far more than simple photosynthesis. Amazon trees and other vegetation produce over 3,000 different chemical compounds that are released into the atmosphere, each serving specific functions in atmospheric chemistry. Some compounds serve as cloud condensation nuclei, encouraging rainfall in areas that need moisture. Others act as chemical catalysts, accelerating or inhibiting atmospheric reactions that affect global climate patterns. But perhaps most remarkably, the forest seems able to adjust these chemical emissions in response to changing conditions. During droughts, certain trees increase production of compounds that encourage cloud formation and rainfall. When atmospheric CO2 levels rise, other species increase their absorption rates while releasing compounds that help other plants optimize their own carbon sequestration. Indigenous accounts suggest that this responsive atmospheric management is not entirely automatic, but involves conscious coordination by beings who understand Earth's atmospheric needs on a global scale. The forest's breathing patterns are said to be guided by what shamans call the breath keepers, entities that monitor atmospheric conditions across the planet and direct the Amazon's responses accordingly. These breath keepers are described as working from vast underground chambers where they maintain living maps of global atmospheric conditions, updated continuously through the forest's own sensing networks. Using this information, they coordinate the forest's breathing patterns to provide whatever atmospheric adjustments are needed to maintain planetary climate stability. The existence of such chambers would require engineering capabilities that exceed conventional understanding of what is possible using biological systems. But indigenous descriptions include specific details that suggest sophisticated atmospheric management infrastructure hidden within the forest itself. The Kayapo people describe underground installations where air circulation is managed through networks of living tubes, modified plant roots and vines that can direct airflow with precision that rivals mechanical ventilation systems. These biological air handling systems reportedly can filter, process, and chemically modify air as it moves through the network, producing customized atmospheric outputs that are released at specific locations throughout the forest. Oral traditions from the Ashwar people describe even more elaborate atmospheric management systems, including underground chambers where modified trees grow in controlled environments, bred specifically for their ability to produce particular atmospheric compounds. These breath gardens are said to contain plant species that exist nowhere else on Earth, created through selective breeding programs that have operated for thousands of years. The compounds produced by these specialized plants allegedly include atmospheric catalysts that can influence weather patterns across vast distances. By releasing precise quantities of these compounds at specific times, the atmospheric managers can reportedly encourage rainfall in drought-stricken areas, dissipate dangerous storm systems, and even influence global temperature patterns through strategic cloud seeding. Evidence for such sophisticated atmospheric management capabilities can be found in satellite data that shows the Amazon's influence on global weather patterns, extending far beyond what conventional climate models predict. The forest's atmospheric emissions create rainfall patterns that influence agriculture in North America, affect monsoon cycles in Asia, and contribute to weather systems that reach Europe and Africa. Dr. Thomas Lovejoy, often called the godfather of biodiversity, has documented atmospheric influences that suggest intentional management. We see the Amazon responding to atmospheric conditions in ways that seem strategically designed to maintain global climate stability. When other regions experience drought, the Amazon increases its water vapor production. When atmospheric CO2 levels spike, the forest's absorption rates increase proportionally. These responses happen too quickly and too precisely to be explained by natural adaptation alone. The atmospheric management system reportedly operates through a combination of biological and technological elements that blur the traditional boundaries between natural and artificial systems. Trees serve as both atmospheric processors and communication nodes, their roots connected to underground networks that coordinate responses across thousands of miles of rainforest. The Takuna people describe underground installations where humans work alongside these biological systems, monitoring atmospheric conditions through instruments that are grown rather than manufactured. These living instruments allegedly can detect atmospheric changes with sensitivity that exceeds any electronic sensors, providing real-time data on atmospheric conditions across the entire planet. Using this information, the atmospheric managers can coordinate responses that involve not just the Amazon, but other forest systems across South America and beyond. The breathing patterns of different forest regions are synchronized to create continental-scale atmospheric management that maintains optimal conditions for both forest health and global climate stability. The carbon sequestration capabilities of this managed breathing system reportedly exceed anything that natural forests could achieve through photosynthesis alone. Indigenous accounts describe underground carbon storage systems where captured CO2 is converted into stable forms that can be stored indefinitely without risk of release back to the atmosphere. These carbon storage systems allegedly utilize modified rock formations and underground chambers where captured carbon is integrated into mineral structures through biological processes that effectively remove it from the atmospheric cycle permanently. The scale of these operations, if they exist as described, would make the Amazon the most effective carbon sequestration system on the planet. The atmospheric management capabilities extend to weather control through strategic manipulation of humidity, temperature, and air pressure patterns. By coordinating the release of water vapor and other compounds across multiple locations, the forest's breathing system can allegedly create or dissipate cloud formations, redirect storm systems, and even generate controlled rainfall in areas that need additional moisture. This weather management capability would explain some of the atmospheric anomalies that have puzzled meteorologists studying the Amazon region. Rainfall patterns that don't match computer models, storm systems that dissipate unexpectedly, and microclimates that seem to operate independently of regional weather patterns all become explicable if the forest is actively managing its own atmospheric conditions. The implications of such capabilities extend far beyond regional climate control. If the Amazon truly functions as a managed atmospheric processing system, it represents humanity's most important life support infrastructure, maintaining atmospheric conditions that make complex life possible across the entire planet. Indigenous elders who claim knowledge of these systems warn that the forest's breathing capabilities are not limitless. The atmospheric management systems require enormous energy inputs and depend on maintaining precise ecological balances that are threatened by deforestation, pollution, and climate change. Don Agustin Rivas, a master shaman of the Shipibo people, explains, "The forest breathes for all of us, but its breath grows weaker each year as more trees are cut, more rivers polluted, more songs silenced. The breath keepers work harder now than ever before, but they cannot maintain the earth's breathing alone. They need the forest to be strong, and they need humans to remember their role in keeping the great breathing alive." The possibility that Earth's atmospheric stability depends on a consciously managed biological system hidden within the Amazon rainforest raises profound questions about humanity's relationship with the natural world. If indigenous accounts are accurate, then the preservation of the Amazon becomes not just an environmental issue, but a matter of planetary survival. And if the atmospheric managers who guide the forest's breathing patterns are indeed conscious beings working to maintain global climate stability, then humanity's response to climate change may depend not on technology alone, but on learning to cooperate with intelligent systems that have been maintaining Earth's habitability for far longer than human civilization has existed. In the vast green cathedral of the Amazon, the ancient breathing continues, inhalation and exhalation coordinated across millions of acres of forest, processing the Earth's atmosphere with precision that no human technology can match. Whether this breathing system will continue to function as human impact on the forest increases remains the most crucial question facing our species' future on this planet. The Earth breathes through the Amazon, and the Amazon breathes through intelligence that spans scales from individual trees to global atmospheric systems. In that breathing lies not just the forest's secret, but the secret of life itself on a planet whose atmosphere has been carefully maintained by forces we're only beginning to understand. Beneath the Amazon rainforest, hidden from satellite surveillance and conventional geological surveys, flows a network of underground waterways that indigenous peoples describe as the memory rivers, subterranean streams that carry not just water, but information, history, and consciousness itself through the living geology of South America. These are not merely aquifers or cave systems, but complex hydrological networks that have been modified and enhanced over millennia to serve as both transportation corridors and storage systems for a civilization that exists primarily below ground. The memory rivers connect vast underground chambers scattered across the Amazon basin, creating a subterranean infrastructure that rivals any surface transportation system in scope and sophistication. But unlike surface rivers that flow according to gravity and topography, these underground networks appear to operate according to principles that suggest conscious direction and management. Dr. Roberto Silva, a hydrologist from the University of Brasilia, who has studied Amazonian groundwater systems for over 20 years, describes discoveries that challenge conventional understanding of subterranean hydrology. We found underground water flows that move uphill, streams that maintain constant temperature regardless of depth, and water chemistry that changes dramatically over short distances in ways that suggest artificial processing rather than natural mineral dissolution. The indigenous peoples who serve as guides in regions above these underground networks speak of the memory rivers not as static water systems, but as living entities capable of storing and transmitting information across vast distances. According to oral traditions passed down through dozens of generations, knowledge can be encoded into the molecular structure of the water itself, creating liquid libraries that preserve everything from historical records to technical specifications. The Guarani people have developed perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of these information storage capabilities. Guarani shamans describe ceremonies in which they drink memories, consuming specially prepared water from sacred springs that allegedly contains encoded information from ancestors who lived centuries ago. Master waterkeeper Vera Miriam explains the process. The water remembers everything it has touched, everyone who has blessed it, every ceremony where it has been used. When we drink ceremonial water prepared according to the old teachings, we can access these memories, learn from ancestors whose physical forms disappeared long ago, but whose knowledge lives on in the living water. The ceremonies involve more than simply consuming spring water. The water must be collected from specific locations at particular times, processed through ritual procedures that allegedly activate its information storage capabilities, and consumed under conditions that optimize the transfer of encoded knowledge to human consciousness. Participants in these water memory ceremonies report experiences remarkably similar to those described by users of plant medicines, visions of historical events, access to technical knowledge they did not previously possess, and encounters with non-physical entities who provide teachings and guidance. But while plant medicines create temporary altered states of consciousness, the water ceremonies allegedly produce permanent integration of new knowledge and abilities. The geological surveys that have detected these underground water systems reveal characteristics that suggest modification by sophisticated engineering. Underground streams flow through chambers carved with precision that exceeds natural cave formation processes, lined with mineral deposits that enhance water purity and preserve particular chemical compositions over vast distances. The chambers themselves, detected through ground-penetrating radar and seismic analysis, show geometric patterns that resemble urban planning rather than natural cave systems. They are arranged in networks that suggest specific functions, some optimized for water storage, others designed for flow regulation, still others configured for what appears to be processing or treatment of the water itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a geologist who participated in classified surveys of these systems, describes findings that were suppressed from public release. We found underground chambers that could hold millions of gallons of water, connected by tunnels that showed clear signs of artificial modification. The mineral composition of the walls suggested they were designed to filter and purify water as it flowed through the system, creating water quality that exceeded anything achievable with surface treatment methods. The tunnels connecting these chambers extend for hundreds of miles, creating underground transportation networks that could allow rapid movement of both water and people across vast distances. Indigenous accounts describe using these tunnel systems for long-distance travel, moving between communities separated by weeks of surface travel in a matter of days through the underground routes. But the most remarkable aspect of these tunnel systems may be their apparent ability to modify their own configuration. Indigenous travelers describe routes that change over time, tunnels that open and close according to seasonal cycles or specific needs, and passages that seem to respond to the intentions of those who wish to use them. This adaptive capability would require engineering technologies that can modify solid rock formations through biological or chemical processes that operate continuously over long periods. Indigenous accounts suggest that these modifications are guided by conscious intelligence that monitors the tunnel systems and adjusts their configuration to meet changing requirements. The water that flows through these systems reportedly possesses properties that exceed anything found in surface streams. It remains pure despite traveling through areas that should introduce contamination, maintains optimal temperature for human comfort regardless of ambient conditions, and shows chemical compositions that suggest careful artificial adjustment rather than natural mineral dissolution. Most remarkably, the water itself seems to serve as a communication medium, carrying messages and information between distant locations through methods that indigenous peoples compare to electronic data transmission. Shamans describe encoding messages into water samples that are then released into underground streams, with the information arriving at distant locations where other practitioners can decode and retrieve it. The technical requirements for such information transmission through water would involve molecular-level encoding techniques that exceed current scientific capabilities. But indigenous practitioners demonstrate consistent ability to transmit complex information through water-based systems, suggesting access to technologies that mainstream science has not yet developed. The underground chambers that serve as nodes in this water-based network reportedly contain installations that blur the boundary between natural cave formations and sophisticated technological facilities. Indigenous accounts describe vast halls lined with crystalline formations that serve both decorative and functional purposes, processing water through biological and mineral systems that enhance its information storage capabilities. These crystal chambers allegedly operate as both libraries and laboratories, where water-based information systems are maintained and enhanced by beings who have dedicated their lives to preserving knowledge through hydrological technologies. The crystals themselves are said to serve as storage media, capable of holding vast amounts of information in molecular structures that remain stable for millennia. The information stored in these underground libraries reportedly includes not just historical records, but scientific and technical knowledge that spans thousands of years of accumulated research and development. Water samples from these facilities allegedly contain encoded specifications for technologies that could revolutionize surface civilization if the information could be properly decoded and applied. But access to these underground knowledge systems requires more than simply locating the physical chambers. The information encoding used in water-based storage systems reportedly responds only to consciousness that has been properly prepared through indigenous training methods that take years to master. This preparation involves developing sensitivity to subtle chemical and energetic properties of water that allow practitioners to detect and interpret information encoded at molecular levels. It requires learning to communicate with water itself, treating it not as an inert substance but as a conscious medium capable of storing and transmitting intelligence. The training process reportedly includes extended periods of isolation in underground chambers, where students learn to interface directly with water-based information systems. They develop abilities to sense chemical variations that contain encoded data, to influence water chemistry through consciousness-directed techniques, and to maintain the biological and technological systems that keep the underground networks functioning. Masters of these water communication techniques allegedly serve as librarians and technicians for the underground civilization, maintaining the information systems that preserve knowledge and coordinate activities across the vast subterranean network. They can access historical records spanning millennia, technical specifications for technologies that surface science has not yet developed, and communication networks that connect hidden communities across the Amazon basin and beyond. These populations remain hidden not because they lack advanced technology, but because they have chosen to number in the hundreds of thousands, distributed across chambers and tunnel networks that span the entire South American continent. Airlock technologies that integrate completely with natural systems rather than opposing them. Their cities, built within natural and enhanced cave systems, utilize flowing water not just for drinking and sanitation, but as the primary medium for power distribution, communication, and information storage. Every building is connected to the water network, every resident has access to the information systems, and the entire civilization operates as an integrated organism that uses water as its circulatory system. The technologies developed by these underground civilizations allegedly include methods for converting water flow into usable energy, techniques for growing crystalline structures that serve as computing and storage systems, and biological processes that can modify rock and mineral formations to create desired architectural forms. Most remarkably, they have reportedly developed methods for consciousness transfer through water-based systems, allowing individuals to share knowledge and experiences directly through properly prepared water samples. This technology would make conventional education obsolete, as complex knowledge and skills could be transferred from teacher to student through information-encoded water consumed under appropriate conditions. The implications of such technologies extend far beyond their immediate applications. If consciousness itself can be encoded and transmitted through water, then death becomes not an ending but a transition, with individual awareness continuing to exist within the water-based information systems of the underground civilization. Indigenous accounts suggest that many of the ancestors who supposedly died centuries ago continue to exist within these water-based consciousness networks, serving as advisors and teachers for current generations. The memory rivers thus become not just transportation and information systems, but repositories of consciousness itself, preserving the accumulated wisdom of millennia in forms that remain accessible to those who know how to interface with them. For surface dwellers accustomed to electronic information systems, the concept of using water as a storage and transmission medium challenges fundamental assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and matter. But for the indigenous peoples who maintain contact with these underground networks, water consciousness represents the most natural and efficient method for preserving and sharing knowledge across both space and time. The underground rivers continue to flow beneath the Amazon, carrying their cargo of memories, messages, and consciousness through networks that connect past and present, surface and depth, individual awareness and collective intelligence. In their flowing lies not just the story of a hidden civilization, but a demonstration of possibilities for human development that transcend the limitations of individual mortality and material technology. As the surface world faces increasing challenges to its water systems and information infrastructure, the memory rivers offer a glimpse of alternative approaches that integrate consciousness, technology, and natural systems in ways that enhance, rather than deplete the environment that sustains them. Whether surface civilization will prove capable of learning from these underground teachers remains an open question, one that may determine not just the future of the Amazon, but the survival of consciousness itself on a planet where water, memory, and life itself flow together in currents that connect every living thing. In the depths of the Amazon rainforest, beyond the reach of electromagnetic interference from human civilization, exists a phenomenon that indigenous shamans have described for millennia, but that Western science has only recently begun to detect and measure. The forest itself generates and responds to frequencies, electromagnetic, acoustic, and bioelectric patterns that create a complex information network spanning millions of acres of rainforest. This network operates on principles that challenge conventional understanding of how biological systems can process and transmit information. Trees, vines, and other vegetation appear to function as both transmitters and receivers in a communication system that uses the entire electromagnetic spectrum, from extremely low-frequency waves that travel through the Earth itself to subtle bioelectric fields that carry information through direct plant-to-plant contact. Dr. Monica Galliano, a plant biologist whose groundbreaking research has documented plant intelligence and communication capabilities, describes the Amazon as the most sophisticated biological communication network on Earth, operating simultaneously across multiple frequency ranges with precision that rivals human-designed electronic systems. The indigenous peoples who have learned to interface with this forest communication network describe it not as a technological system, but as a form of consciousness that encompasses the entire rainforest ecosystem. According to their accounts, every tree, vine, and flower participates in an ongoing conversation that coordinates everything from nutrient distribution to weather patterns to responses to external threats. The Shipibo people have developed perhaps the most sophisticated techniques for accessing this forest frequency network. Shipibo shamans use specially prepared plant medicines to attune their nervous systems to the bioelectric frequencies generated by forest vegetation, allowing them to tune in to different channels of forest communication. Master Shaman Rosa Jove explains the process. The forest speaks in many voices, on many frequencies, like a radio with thousands of stations. Each plant has its own frequency, its own message, its own contribution to the great conversation. Our medicines allow us to adjust our listening, to tune our minds to different aspects of the forest voice, until we can hear the full symphony of communication that surrounds us always. The plant medicines used in this frequency attunement process reportedly modify human neurology in ways that make the nervous system sensitive to electromagnetic and bioelectric fields that are normally below the threshold of conscious perception. Practitioners describe developing abilities to sense the electrical activity of plants, to detect underground water flows through their electromagnetic signatures, and to perceive the health status of forest areas through changes in their bioelectric emissions. These enhanced perceptual abilities allow human operators to serve as interfaces between forest intelligence and surface world activities. Shamans can allegedly detect approaching threats to forest health, monitor the emotional and physical states of forest wildlife, and coordinate responses to environmental challenges that require action across vast areas of rainforest. Recent scientific research has begun to document some of the electromagnetic phenomena that indigenous practitioners describe. Dr. Massimo Pregnolato, a biophysicist studying electromagnetic fields in biological systems, has measured electrical activity in Amazon vegetation that exceeds anything found in other environments. We're detecting electromagnetic emissions from forest vegetation that show characteristics of intentional communication rather than random biological noise, Pregnolato explains. The signals show coherent patterns, synchronized timing across multiple plant species, and responses to external stimuli that suggest information processing capabilities we don't fully understand. The electromagnetic signatures detected in Amazon vegetation include extremely low-frequency waves that can travel through the Earth itself over vast distances, infrared patterns that carry information through the forest canopy, and bioelectric fields that create localized communication networks between groups of trees and other plants. These different frequency ranges appear to serve different functions within the forest communication system. Low-frequency signals provide long-distance communication capabilities that can coordinate responses across the entire Amazon basin. Mid-range frequencies carry detailed information about local conditions and resource availability. High-frequency signals seem to support real-time coordination of activities within specific forest communities. The technical sophistication of this biological communication system would require signal processing capabilities that rival advanced electronic systems. Plants would need to generate precisely controlled electromagnetic emissions, detect and decode signals from other vegetation, and integrate information from multiple sources to coordinate appropriate responses. Indigenous accounts suggest that this signal processing capability is not limited to individual plants, but emerges from the collective intelligence of forest communities working together. Entire forest areas function as distributed computing systems, with individual trees and plants serving as processing nodes in networks that can solve complex problems and coordinate sophisticated responses to changing conditions. The mycorrhizal networks that connect tree roots throughout the forest reportedly play crucial roles in this information processing system, serving as biological fiber optic cables that carry both chemical and electrical signals across vast distances. Recent research has confirmed that mycorrhizal networks can transmit electrical signals, but indigenous practitioners describe capabilities that exceed anything documented by conventional science. They claim that properly prepared shamans can inject information directly into mycorrhizal networks, encoding messages that travel through underground root systems to recipients hundreds of miles away. This biological internet allegedly operates faster and more reliably than electronic communication systems, while being completely invisible to technological detection methods. The information carried through these biological networks reportedly includes not just simple messages, but complex data packages that contain detailed information about environmental conditions, resource availability, threats to forest health, and coordination instructions for community responses. The encoding methods used in biological information transmission allegedly allow vast amounts of data to be compressed into molecular and electromagnetic patterns that can travel efficiently through living systems. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the forest frequency network is its apparent ability to interface directly with human consciousness. Indigenous practitioners describe achieving states of direct mental connection with forest intelligence, experiencing not just communication with individual plants, but integration with the collective awareness that encompasses entire ecosystem communities. These consciousness interface experiences reportedly provide access to information and perspectives that transcend individual human awareness. Practitioners describe perceiving the forest from the perspective of the ecosystem itself, understanding environmental challenges and opportunities from a viewpoint that encompasses millions of plants, animals, and microorganisms working together as a unified organism. The techniques for achieving this consciousness integration involve more than just consuming plant medicines. Practitioners must undergo years of training that gradually modifies their neurology to become compatible with forest bioelectric patterns. This training reportedly includes meditation practices that synchronize human brainwave patterns with forest electromagnetic emissions, dietary modifications that optimize nervous system sensitivity, and isolation periods in deep forest locations where exposure to forest frequencies can gradually rewire human consciousness. Masters of forest consciousness interface allegedly develop abilities that challenge conventional understanding of human potential. They can perceive events occurring in distant forest locations, predict environmental changes months in advance, and coordinate healing activities that draw on the therapeutic capabilities of entire plant communities. These abilities are not presented as supernatural phenomena, but as natural capacities that emerge when human consciousness learns to operate in harmony with the electromagnetic and bioelectric systems that govern forest ecosystem functions. From this perspective, the apparent psychic abilities of indigenous shamans represent advanced applications of biological technologies that have been developed over thousands of years of research and experimentation. The forest frequency network reportedly operates according to protocols that ensure information security and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive forest communications. Like electronic computer networks, the biological communication systems use encryption methods that protect important information from interference or interception by incompatible consciousness systems. Human access to forest frequency networks requires not just technical knowledge of interface procedures, but ethical preparation that demonstrates respect for forest intelligence and commitment to supporting ecosystem health. The forest consciousness reportedly evaluates potential human partners carefully, providing access only to those who prove themselves trustworthy guardians of the information and capabilities they receive. This selective access policy would explain why forest communication abilities remain limited to indigenous practitioners who have dedicated their lives to forest service. The consciousness interface technologies are not secret because of human secrecy, but because the forest itself chooses its human partners according to criteria that prioritize ecosystem welfare over individual human interests. The implications of such biological communication technologies extend far beyond the Amazon rainforest. If vegetation can indeed process and transmit information with the sophistication described by indigenous practitioners, then every ecosystem on Earth potentially operates as a biological communication network with intelligence and capabilities that exceed human understanding. The frequency phenomena documented in the Amazon may represent just a small sample of the communication activities that occur continuously in natural environments worldwide. Trees in urban parks, agricultural crops, even houseplants may participate in information networks that remain invisible to human awareness, because we lack the biological interface capabilities necessary to access them. For surface civilization facing increasing challenges to electronic communication infrastructure, the forest frequency networks offer glimpses of alternative communication technologies that operate without external power sources, remain functional despite environmental disruption, and actually enhance rather than degrade the ecosystems that support them. But accessing these biological communication capabilities would require fundamental changes in how human civilization relates to natural environments. Instead of viewing nature as a resource to be exploited, humans would need to learn to function as conscious partners in ecosystem communication networks, contributing to, rather than disrupting, the information flows that maintain environmental health. The Amazon rainforest continues to generate its complex symphony of frequencies, broadcasting information across electromagnetic and bioelectric spectrums that carry the conversations of millions of organisms coordinating their activities in service of the whole. Whether human civilization will develop the wisdom and humility necessary to join these conversations remains an open question, one that may determine not just the future of the rainforest, but the survival of consciousness itself on a planet where intelligence flows through every leaf, root, and flower in frequencies that connect all life in networks of unimaginable complexity and beauty. In the vast cathedral of the Amazon, the frequencies continue to flow, carrying messages between dimensions of awareness that span from individual cellular intelligence to the collective consciousness of continents. For those who learn to listen, the forest offers not just communication, but communion with forms of intelligence that have been maintaining the delicate balance of planetary life long before human civilization began its brief and turbulent experiment with consciousness. In the deepest reaches of the Amazon rainforest, where the canopy filters sunlight into a perpetual green twilight and the rhythm of seasons blurs into timeless continuity, indigenous shamans speak of encountering beings who exist outside the linear progression of time that governs surface world experience. These time weavers, as they are known in various tribal languages, allegedly maintain the temporal stability that allows hidden forest civilizations to develop and flourish across timescales that span millennia rather than mere human generations. The concept of non-linear time is central to indigenous understanding of how advanced civilizations could remain hidden within the Amazon while developing technologies and wisdom that exceed surface world capabilities. Master Shaman Don Eduardo Calderon of the Shipibo people explains, "In the deep forest, time is not a river flowing always forward, but a great tree with many branches reaching in all directions. The time weavers help us navigate between these branches, showing us paths that lead not just to different places but to different whens." A ceremony that lasts one night in forest time might give access to lifetimes of experience and learning. These temporal phenomena are not described as supernatural occurrences, but as natural properties of consciousness interaction with environmental factors that exist in undisturbed rainforest areas. The combination of complex electromagnetic fields generated by forest vegetation, unique atmospheric conditions created by dense canopy coverage, and bioactive compounds present in air and water create conditions that allegedly allow consciousness to operate outside normal temporal constraints. Dr. Stanislav Grof, whose decades of consciousness research have documented non-ordinary states of awareness, notes parallels between indigenous descriptions of forest time and phenomena observed in laboratory studies. We've documented cases where subjects in altered states of consciousness experience subjective time periods that extend far beyond the actual duration of their sessions. They report living through years or decades of experience in sessions lasting only hours. The indigenous accounts suggest that certain environmental conditions can naturally induce these temporal distortions without requiring artificial intervention. The time weavers are described not as supernatural entities, but as human beings who have mastered the techniques necessary to navigate and manipulate temporal flow within the forest's temporal distortion zones. Through decades of training in consciousness alteration techniques and extended residence in deep forest areas, they allegedly develop abilities to perceive multiple temporal streams simultaneously and to guide others through experiences that transcend linear time progression. This mastery of temporal navigation reportedly allows hidden forest civilizations to compress centuries of development and experience into much shorter periods of surface world time. Communities can research and perfect technologies over subjective periods spanning hundreds of years, while remaining concealed from surface observation for relatively brief historical periods. The training required to become a time weaver allegedly involves progressive exposure to temporal distortion fields that gradually modify human neurology to function outside normal time constraints. Apprentices spend years in isolation within deep forest areas where temporal flow is naturally distorted, learning to maintain conscious awareness while experiencing multiple temporal streams simultaneously. Carlos Perez Schumer, an elder of the Achuar people who claims to have trained with time weavers, describes the process. First, you must learn to let go of surface time, the time that moves always forward like water flowing down a hill. You sit in the deep forest until forest time enters your bones, until you can feel the slow time of trees, the quick time of hummingbirds, the circular time of seasons all moving within you at once. Only then can the time weavers teach you to step between the different rivers of time. The techniques allegedly used by time weavers include sophisticated applications of plant medicines that modify temporal perception, meditation practices that synchronize consciousness with forest electromagnetic rhythms, and ritual procedures that take advantage of natural temporal distortion fields to achieve desired temporal navigation effects. But perhaps most remarkably, the time weavers are said to use their temporal navigation abilities to maintain historical continuity for hidden forest civilizations across periods that would otherwise result in cultural decay and knowledge loss. By experiencing extended subjective time periods within compressed surface timeframes, they can personally witness and preserve historical knowledge that spans far longer periods than normal human lifetimes would allow. These living historians allegedly serve as repositories of cultural memory that extends back thousands of years, maintaining detailed knowledge of historical events, technological developments, and cultural evolution through direct personal experience rather than written records or oral tradition. They can provide eyewitness accounts of historical periods that predate recorded history, having personally experienced these events through temporal navigation techniques. The historical knowledge preserved by time weavers reportedly includes detailed information about pre-Columbian civilizations that achieved levels of technological and cultural sophistication far beyond what conventional archaeology acknowledges. They describe vast cities, advanced transportation systems, and sophisticated technologies that were hidden or destroyed during various historical cataclysms, but that continue to exist within temporal distortion zones where they remain accessible to properly prepared visitors. These hidden historical civilizations allegedly continue to develop and evolve within their temporal refuges, using Timeweaver guidance to maintain contact with surface world developments while remaining concealed from direct observation. They can study surface world technologies and cultural developments, incorporating useful innovations while avoiding the conflicts and instabilities that characterize surface civilization. The Timeweavers also reportedly use their temporal navigation abilities to provide guidance and assistance to surface world individuals who demonstrate readiness for contact with hidden civilizations. By manipulating temporal flow, they can create expanded subjective time periods during which surface visitors can receive extensive training and education that would normally require years or decades to complete. These accelerated learning experiences allegedly occur within what shamans call time pockets, areas where temporal distortion allows subjective experience to expand far beyond objective time passage. Visitors report spending weeks or months in learning environments that exist outside normal temporal flow, receiving instruction in technologies, healing techniques, and consciousness development methods that would be impossible to master within normal time constraints. Dr. Rick Strassman, whose research with consciousness-altering compounds has documented experiences remarkably similar to indigenous descriptions of temporal distortion, notes, subjects consistently report encountering teaching entities who provide intensive instruction during sessions that last only minutes of objective time, but feel like extended periods of learning and exploration. The knowledge they report acquiring often proves to be accurate and useful in ways that suggest genuine information transfer rather than mere hallucination. The technologies allegedly used by Timeweavers to create and navigate temporal distortion fields include crystalline structures that generate electromagnetic fields designed to interact with consciousness in ways that modify temporal perception. These crystal technologies are said to be grown rather than manufactured, using botanical and geological processes that create precisely tuned resonance systems. The crystals reportedly function as temporal anchors that can stabilize specific time streams, allowing individuals to move between different temporal flows while maintaining conscious continuity. Master Time Weavers can allegedly use these crystal systems to create temporal bridges that connect different historical periods, allowing communication and travel between civilizations that exist in separate time streams. But the most profound applications of Timeweaver technologies may involve what indigenous practitioners describe as temporal healing, the ability to repair damage that has occurred in past time streams by accessing and modifying the temporal foundations of present conditions. This would allow correction of historical traumas, environmental damage, and cultural disruptions by addressing their temporal roots rather than just their present manifestations. These temporal healing techniques allegedly operate on the principle that past, present, and future exist simultaneously within consciousness, and that sufficiently skilled practitioners can access and modify past events to create more positive present outcomes. While such abilities sound impossible from a conventional physics perspective, they align with quantum mechanical theories that suggest non-linear relationships between observer consciousness and temporal reality. The Timeweavers reportedly use these temporal healing capabilities to maintain the stability and continuity of hidden forest civilizations across historical periods that would otherwise result in their destruction or discovery. By accessing and modifying temporal streams, they can prevent or redirect historical events that threaten the security of hidden communities. This temporal protection system would explain how advanced civilizations could remain concealed within the Amazon, despite centuries of European exploration and modern surveillance technologies. The temporal barriers maintained by Timeweavers would make hidden civilizations effectively invisible to surface world observation by ensuring that contact occurs only under carefully controlled conditions that preserve the security of both surface and hidden worlds. The training of new Timeweavers reportedly requires identifying individuals with natural sensitivity to temporal phenomena and providing them with intensive education in consciousness manipulation techniques that take decades to master. Candidates must demonstrate not only technical competence in temporal navigation, but ethical development that ensures they will use their abilities in service of long-term, civilizational stability rather than personal advantage. The ethical requirements for Time Weaver training reportedly include commitments to preserve rather than exploit temporal knowledge, to protect rather than expose hidden civilizations, and to serve the long-term welfare of consciousness development rather than immediate personal or tribal interests. These requirements ensure that temporal navigation abilities are used to support the evolution of wisdom rather than mere technological advancement. As surface world civilizations face increasing instability and threats to long-term survival, the temporal navigation technologies maintained by Amazon Time Weavers offer glimpses of possibilities for transcending the limitations of linear time that constrain conventional approaches to civilizational development. But accessing these technologies would require fundamental changes in consciousness that few surface dwellers are prepared to undertake. The Time Weavers continue their patient work within the temporal distortion zones of the Amazon rainforest, maintaining the temporal stability that allows hidden civilizations to develop across timescales that span millennia while remaining concealed from surface observation. Their mastery of temporal flow offers hope that consciousness itself can transcend the apparent limitations of linear time, accessing forms of experience and development that operate according to principles that exceed current understanding of what is possible within the constraints of conventional physics. In the timeless depths of the Amazon, where past, present, and future converge in the eternal now of forest consciousness, the Time Weavers continue their ancient craft of maintaining temporal stability for forms of civilization that exist outside the linear progression of surface world history. For those who learn to perceive time as the multidimensional tapestry it truly is, the forest offers not just concealment, but transformation into forms of awareness that transcend the apparent finitude of individual existence, accessing the eternal consciousness that flows through all temporal streams in currents that connect every moment in time through the living intelligence of the forest itself. As we reach the end of our journey into the green heart of mystery, we find ourselves standing at a threshold that is both geographic and philosophical, both investigative and transformational. The evidence we have gathered, the testimonies of indigenous elders, the accounts of vanished explorers, the satellite anomalies that suggest vast geometric patterns carved into the forest floor, the reports of underground chambers and aerial cities that remain invisible to surface observation, all points toward a single, profound possibility that challenges our fundamental understanding of human civilization and our relationship with the natural world. The Amazon rainforest may indeed harbor a secret civilization, but not in the way Western minds typically conceive of cities and societies. Instead of imposing human structures upon the landscape, this hidden civilization appears to have chosen integration so complete that it has become indistinguishable from the forest itself. Their cities grow rather than being built. Their technologies operate through biological rather than mechanical systems, and their consciousness has expanded to encompass not just individual awareness, but the collective intelligence of entire ecosystems. This possibility forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the assumptions that underlie our own civilization. We have built our societies on principles of separation from nature, from each other, from the consequences of our actions. We measure progress by our ability to control and manipulate our environment, success by our capacity to extract resources and accumulate wealth. Our cities rise like monuments to human dominance over the natural world, and our technologies operate through processes that consume finite resources while producing waste that degrades the systems that sustain life itself. The hidden civilization described in these accounts operates according to entirely different principles. Instead of separation, they have chosen integration. Instead of dominance, they practice partnership. Instead of extraction, they engage in enhancement. Their technologies strengthen rather than degrade the ecosystems they inhabit. Their cities become more beautiful and functional with each passing year, and their consciousness has expanded to include awareness of consequences that extend across generations, centuries, perhaps millennia. If such a civilization truly exists within the Amazon rainforest, their choice to remain hidden becomes not mysterious, but logical. From their perspective, contact with surface civilization would represent not an opportunity, but a threat, not because surface dwellers lack intelligence or good intentions, but because we lack the consciousness development necessary to interface with their level of technological and social sophistication without causing disruption or damage. This creates what indigenous elders describe as the choice point, the moment when surface civilization must decide whether to continue along its current trajectory of separation and domination, or to begin the difficult process of transformation that would make genuine contact with hidden forest civilizations possible. This choice cannot be made through legislation or international agreements, but only through the individual transformation of consciousness that, when multiplied across millions of people, creates the collective shift necessary to change the fundamental operating principles of human civilization. The signs that we are approaching this choice point are visible everywhere in our current historical moment. Climate change forces us to confront the consequences of treating the Earth as a resource to be exploited rather than a living system to be partnered with. Environmental degradation challenges us to develop technologies that enhance rather than degrade natural systems. Social inequality and political instability demonstrate the unsustainability of systems based on competition rather than cooperation. At the same time, scientific research is beginning to validate many of the principles that indigenous peoples have maintained for millennia. Plant intelligence research confirms that vegetation possesses information processing capabilities that exceed simple mechanical responses to environmental stimuli. Ecological studies reveal that natural systems operate as integrated networks that share resources and coordinate responses across vast distances. Consciousness research documents abilities and potentials that exceed conventional understanding of human cognitive limitations. These converging developments suggest that surface civilization is beginning to develop the knowledge base necessary to understand and eventually interface with the technologies and consciousness principles that allegedly govern hidden forest civilizations. But knowledge alone is insufficient for contact. What is required is the wisdom to apply knowledge in ways that support rather than disrupt the delicate balances that sustain life on Earth. The indigenous elders who maintain contact with hidden forest civilizations describe specific criteria that must be met before open contact becomes possible. Surface civilization must demonstrate its commitment to environmental partnership rather than environmental exploitation. It must develop technologies that enhance rather than degrade natural systems. It must evolve social structures based on cooperation rather than competition. And perhaps most importantly, it must cultivate forms of consciousness that can interface with collective intelligence, rather than remaining trapped within individual ego boundaries. These requirements may seem impossibly idealistic from the perspective of current global conditions, but indigenous teaching suggests that the transformation necessary to meet them can occur much more rapidly than surface dwellers typically assume. The plant medicines, consciousness techniques, and ecological wisdom preserved within indigenous traditions offer pathways for accelerated consciousness development that could allow surface civilization to achieve the readiness necessary for contact within a single generation. But this transformation requires more than individual development. It requires collective commitment to values and principles that prioritize long-term survival over short-term advantage, ecological health over economic growth, and wisdom development over mere technological advancement. It requires the courage to abandon systems and structures that have served surface civilization in the past, but that have become obstacles to the consciousness evolution necessary for our continued survival. The hidden civilizations of the Amazon allegedly represent not a primitive retreat from technological development, but an advanced demonstration of what human societies could become when consciousness evolution keeps pace with technological capability. Their concealment serves not only to protect them from surface world disruption, but to preserve an example of sustainable civilization that could guide surface transformation when the readiness for contact finally develops. The knowledge systems maintained within hidden forest civilizations reportedly include solutions to many of the challenges currently facing surface civilization energy technologies that operate without depleting natural resources, healing techniques that address root causes rather than just symptoms, social organization methods that maintain stability across centuries, consciousness development practices that unlock human potentials currently considered impossible. But access to these solutions requires more than discovering the physical locations of hidden forest settlements. It requires the consciousness development necessary to interface with beings whose awareness encompasses scales of time and space that far exceed individual human perspective. It requires the humility to recognize that surface civilization's current difficulties stem not from lack of information, but from lack of wisdom in applying the information we already possess. The choice point we face is not ultimately about whether hidden civilizations exist within the Amazon rainforest, but about what kind of civilization we choose to become. If we continue along our current trajectory of separation and domination, the question of contact becomes irrelevant. We will lack the consciousness, development necessary to recognize or interface with forms of civilization that operate according to principles of integration and partnership. But if we choose to begin the difficult work of consciousness transformation, if we commit to developing technologies that enhance rather than degrade natural systems, if we evolve social structures that support long-term sustainability rather than short-term profit, then contact with hidden forest civilizations may occur naturally as a result of our expanded capacity to recognize and interface with forms of intelligence that have been present all along, waiting for us to develop the wisdom necessary to join their ancient conversation. The signs and indicators we have explored throughout this investigation, the plant medicines that reveal expanded states of consciousness, the communication networks that connect forest intelligence across vast distances, the underground chambers that preserve knowledge across millennia, the aerial cities that demonstrate architecture in perfect harmony with natural systems, all may be elements of a vast teaching system designed to guide surface consciousness toward the recognition of what becomes possible when human intelligence learns to operate in partnership with the intelligence of the Earth itself. In the end, the greatest treasure of the Amazon may not be the location of hidden cities or the technologies they have developed, but the demonstration they provide of human potential, realized in harmony with natural systems. They offer us not just the possibility of contact with an advanced civilization, but the inspiration to become worthy of that contact by transforming ourselves into the kind of beings who could contribute to, rather than disrupt, the delicate balance of wisdom and technology that has allowed hidden civilizations to thrive for millennia. The choice point approaches with each passing day, marked not by calendar dates, but by the accumulating consequences of our individual and collective decisions. Every choice we make to separate or integrate, to dominate or partner, to exploit or enhance moves us closer to or further from the consciousness development necessary for contact with the hidden teachers who may be waiting in the green cathedral of the Amazon. The invitation is always present, encoded in the rustle of leaves, the flow of underground rivers, the electromagnetic frequencies that carry messages across the forest networks, the ancient memories preserved in plant medicines and crystalline chambers. But accepting that invitation requires more than curiosity or courage. It requires the transformation of consciousness that allows us to perceive forms of intelligence that operate outside the narrow band of awareness within which surface civilization has learned to function. The forest waits, patient as it has always been, holding space for the moment when surface and hidden worlds might finally meet, not as strangers, but as cousins recognizing each other after a long separation. Whether that moment arrives in our lifetime or in generations yet to come depends on choices we make today, individually and collectively, about what kind of beings we choose to become, and what kind of world we choose to create for those who will follow us into the mystery that continues to unfold within the vast green heart of our living planet. As our investigation draws toward its close, we find ourselves changed by the journey itself, not merely by the information we have gathered, but by the questions that have taken root in the soil of our consciousness. We began this exploration seeking evidence of a hidden civilization within the Amazon rainforest, and we discovered something far more profound. Evidence of possibilities that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of civilization itself. The testimonies we have heard from indigenous elders whose knowledge spans generations, from scientists whose instruments detect patterns that exceed conventional explanation, from explorers whose experiences defy easy categorization, all point toward a single, transformative recognition. The Amazon rainforest is not merely an ecosystem to be studied, or a resource to be managed, but a form of intelligence that operates on scales of space and time that encompass the evolution of consciousness itself. Whether the hidden civilizations described in these accounts exist as physical communities, dwelling in underground chambers and aerial cities, or as expressions of forest intelligence that transcend the boundaries between individual and collective awareness, their reality lies not in what can be measured by external instruments, but in what can be recognized by consciousness prepared to perceive forms of organization that exceed the limitations of linear thinking. The greatest mystery we have encountered is not the location of secret settlements or the specifications of biological technologies, but the recognition that consciousness itself may be far more flexible, creative, and interconnected than our current understanding acknowledges. The plant medicines that reveal expanded states of awareness, the communication networks that connect forest intelligence across vast distances, the temporal distortions that allow experience to transcend linear time progression, all suggest that reality itself operates according to principles that consciousness research has only begun to explore. This recognition carries with it both profound hope and profound responsibility. If consciousness can indeed transcend the apparent limitations of individual awareness, if intelligence can manifest through biological systems that integrate individual and collective functioning, if human potential includes capacities that our current education systems do not attempt to develop, then the challenges facing our civilization become not insurmountable obstacles, but opportunities for evolutionary transformation. But realizing these possibilities requires more than intellectual understanding or even individual development. It requires the collective commitment to principles and practices that support consciousness, evolution, on the scale necessary to interface with forms of intelligence that operate beyond the boundaries of conventional human awareness. It requires the courage to abandon systems and structures that have served us in the past, but that have become limitations on the consciousness development necessary for our continued evolution. The hidden teachers of the Amazon, whether they exist as separate beings or as expressions of forest intelligence, offer guidance for this transformation process. Their alleged mastery of biological technologies demonstrates possibilities for human development that harmonize rather than conflict with natural,